This is one of the early Briggs and Stratton Vanguard engines from 1988, and in this video I'm going to fully restore it. The main reason for the rebuild is because it burns oil, most likely due to worn rings. So let's first of all get it fully disassembled. We're now getting to the point where I need to get inside the engine, but before I can do that, the key needs to be removed from the keyway. And because it's stuck, a great way of doing this is by quenching it. So I heat it up and then I douse it with cold water and the key just pops out. I always enjoy the great reveal when you first remove the sump from an engine. You just never know exactly what you're going to find. And in this case, there's quite a lot of build-up in here. You can see exhaust gases have been getting past the head gasket and into the crankcase. Everything is very black. At the bottom of the sump is the mesh screen for the oil pump. And this is the governor on the camshaft. It's always worth making a note of the timing marks. You can see we've got 2 timing dots on both the crankshaft gear and the camshaft there. Very essential for when reassembling. So this is the camshaft and all the lobes look to be in very good condition, as does the compression release. And then down here we have the valve tappets or the push rods. To keep these in order, I just very simply mark a piece of cardboard and then pop them into their correct positions. Next, the big ends can be disconnected from the crankshaft and the pistons can then be pulled out of the engine. Well, this first one looks quite good, a little bit of scoring, not too serious though. And the second one also looks to be quite good. Before these are reinstalled into the engine, I will be fully inspecting them and making sure there's no issues at all with them, and of course they will be getting a new set of rings. But the first impressions are not really too bad. And finally, the crankshaft can be removed. So you really can see that it's all very stained in here. It should be a nice silver colour. We need to really clean things up. We're going to have to remove the bushing, and there's an awful lot of aluminium oxide on the exterior, so I'm going to have to sandblast them as well. But the first step is to remove the oil pump, then I can put the sump and the crankcase into the hot washer. That will remove the top thick layer of dirt, and then after that I can use white spirit. The hot washer is great for removing the thick oil on the exterior, but it's not so good with the ingrained contamination. That's where the white spirit is fantastic. You can see the before and after here. And the final visual cleanup is with the sandblaster. This is to get rid of that horrible aluminium oxide, and this will make the sump look like new again. But of course, by doing this, it is introducing lots of grit into the sump and into the crankcase, so thorough cleaning is required afterwards. I use so many different methods to deep clean the crankcase and sump. I use brake cleaner, water, ultrasonic cleaner, compressed air, the list goes on. I just am always so concerned that something is going to get left behind, but it's well worth putting the time into it. The results speak for themselves. I'm now going to repeat the same process with the crankcase, and it does take about a day for each one. About halfway through, and this is what it looks like before and after. The crankcase is now sandblasted, but before I can go in with my super deep thorough clean, I'm going to hone the two cylinders. This video doesn't really do it justice, but it takes so many hours to get them to this stage. To finish off with, I'm just doing a nice good coat of heatproof lacquer to give them a really nice finish and so that they don't oxidize again. I'm now almost ready to start the reassembly, but before I do, I need to press out this old bushing. And to do this, we need to get the roll pin knocked into the engine crankcase. Unfortunately, I don't have the tool. Briggs and Stratton once made a tool for this, but they don't anymore, so I'm going to have to make it myself. The idea I've gone with here is just so you can put different length bolts in to cater to the application you're working on. It's a simple but effective idea. With the roll pin pushed back, the bushing can now be pressed out. The first part to be fitted to the engine is the new crankshaft bushing. With the bushing pressed into the engine carefully, making sure it's all aligned, this roll pin needs to be fitted, but first we need to grind off a little bit of the end. It's time to start work on the pistons. Now, I always fit new piston rings to an engine when I reassemble them, And after a bit of research, I discovered that for these Vanguard engines, you've got to buy the entire piston assembly. You can't get just the rings. So let's remove the connecting rods first of all. The two connecting rods look to be in fairly good condition, so let's give them a quick clean so we can thoroughly inspect them. After an inspection, I discovered that there was actually a hole in the end of both of them. Now this might have been like this from new, but as it went all the way through to where the piston pin goes, I didn't really feel comfortable with fitting these. So I decided to buy new ones. And this was yet again another big expense. But you can see the new ones are looking so much better with no holes. We also have the new piston assembly, and they do look a little bit different to the original ones, but they are the same part number. So with the ring gaps checked, we can now fit the rings to the pistons, and then we can attach the connecting rod. If you look closely, you can see one connecting rod says out 1 and one says out 2. They do need to be this way because obviously they're fitted in opposite directions in the engine in a V shape. And now we can progress with the reassembly. It is just the complete reverse order of the disassembly. It's very important that everything is torqued correctly, so the first part to be torqued is the connecting rod big ends. If it isn't torqued within spec, then obviously too loose, the connecting rod could disconnect from the crankshaft, and too tight, it could cause premature wear. This is the oil pump, and you can see we do have two dots on the rotors. These need to be aligned at reassembly. If you're rebuilding your own Vanguard engine, then it is very important to remember this O-ring here for the oil passage. The sticky red substance you see me applying here is actually not the same as the reassembly oil. This is the Permatex High-Tack gasket sealant. It's just going to make it much easier for the gasket to seal and guarantee there's going to be no leaks. And we're now ready for the sump, which concludes the reassembly of the internal part of the engine. Moving on, we have the 2-cylinder heads, and after looking at the crankcase and sump all this time, these really do look horrific. Hard to believe that the entire engine used to look like this. So let's fully disassemble these, we'll remove the valves and get them all cleaned up. These will also have to be sandblasted because they are just in such terrible shape, and it's the only way really of removing the aluminium oxide. I always find it so satisfying seeing what the sandblaster can do to aluminium. It looks so much cleaner already. So we're now ready to thoroughly clean this part in the ultrasonic cleaner, and then we're going to lap the valves in to make sure the valves create a good seal. And now the heads can be reassembled, starting with 2 new oil seals. It looks almost as good as new. So that can now be fitted to the engine, but we can't torque them yet. We can't torque the bolts because we need to make sure that the intake manifold and the exhaust manifold fit okay. With the intake and the exhaust manifolds fitted, the heads can be torqued in 3 phases. So we just gradually increase the torque each time. We then have the rocker covers, and the valve gaps do need to be set using a feeler gauge. There is an adjustment screw with a locking nut, and with the correct size feeler gauge in the gap, you then lock the nut in the correct position, and this will set the valve backlash. It's always nice to see a before and after. So the rocker cover is now ready to have a gasket fitted, and then that can go onto the cylinder head, and that will conclude this section of the rebuild. We can now start to build up the top section of the engine, and I actually did get some of these engine parts powder coated. All of the electrical components in this top section were in horrific condition, so everything is being replaced at a fairly great expense.
The air gap for the new ignition coils is 10 thousandths of an inch. So I'm choosing the card that came with it, but you can also use a business card to set this. Finally, I'm building up the front of the engine, which includes the carburetor, the linkages, the governor lever, and the air filter box. I decided to stick with the nice red engine top cover. A lot of the Vanguards are actually black, but this is original and it looks super good. It also requires a new fuel pump. I quickly put together a new decal because you can't buy these anymore, so I custom made this one just to really finish it off and make it shine. And after all of that work and great expense, the engine is finished.